I would like you to please close your eyes. Take deep, slow breaths, in through your nose and out through your mouth. Imagine you're on a beach getting ready to go kayaking. You can feel the sun warming your skin. You can hear the rest of your class talking and laughing and the thud of kayaks being packed and the water lapping at the shore. Imagine the feel of sand under your feet and blowing gently onto your legs. Now open your eyes. This is what we're trying to capture through outdoor photography, feelings and experiences. I've decided to take this opportunity to explain to you the best ways to capture stories in the outdoors. I'm going to assume you're taking these photos for personal use rather than commercial use, because the techniques used can be quite different. Even if you do want to take photos professionally, photographing people you know allows you to practice with an unbothered audience and gives you insider knowledge into the essence of a person, which will help you when creating meaningful images. Even if the photos aren't perfect, they will mean more to you than photos of strangers or of just the scenery. Gear. There are many options when choosing a camera. These can be rugged and compact like this GoPro and this Nikon camera, fragile but effective like this Canon DSLR, which stands for Digital Single Lens Reflex Camera and means photographers see exactly what they're shooting because it's directed to their eye using a mirror and prism system, or simply phones. They all have their advantages and disadvantages, and what works best for you will vary hugely depending on which pursuits are your favourite. For example, if you're a kayaker, waterproofing would be more important to you than if you were, say, a rock climber. GoPros are lightweight, compact and durable. They have very wide lenses that pick up a lot more of the surroundings than standard cameras, and their footage is very high resolution. They are able to be mounted on things easily, which is why you see so many of them on helmets, chest straps and dogs. They struggle to capture photos and footage in harsh lighting conditions and don't give you as much control as other kinds of camera. My Nikon camera is waterproof to 10 meters and shockproof to 2 meters, which I find very comforting when I'm on trips. I've had this camera for 5 years and love the security of knowing I'm not going to hurt it if I drop it or get it wet. My one complaint is that I don't have as much control over the camera's shooting settings. It has different settings that are supposed to help you take different kinds of photos, but I don't find they make much difference. It often gets the exposure wrong, making my photos look washed out, but it is very high resolution. DSLR cameras allow for the ultimate control over your images, with many different preset options and ways to modify how much control you have over individual settings. For example, these three are for portraits, landscapes and close-ups respectively. There's M for manual, which gives you control over every setting, and then AV, TV and P, which mean you can manually adjust some of the settings and the camera will automatically select the rest. I like to shoot in TV when I first started using the camera because it was the quickest way for me to adjust the brightness and clarity. The downside is that they are big, heavy and fragile. This is my Canon 1300D. It's a lower end DSLR camera. I usually shoot my videos on my mum's Canon 60D because it has a screen that folds out so I can see myself while I'm recording, if I need to, and it connects to this remote. Most phones now are equipped with cameras, and these are extremely convenient because most people carry one on them anyway. They are obviously multifunctional, lightweight and compact. There's a big range in the quality of the images produced and the amount of control you have over your images, so it kind of depends on what kind of phone you have. The cameras are of course the most obvious item of gear for photography, but there are other elements like tripods and protection systems like cases. This is the tripod I usually use when I'm filming. Starting from the bottom, it's got little swivel feet so that when you adjust the length, which you do like this, the feet can swivel when you change the angle. It's got two foam grips right here for holding if you need to while you're shooting. I don't usually bother. I try and have them facing me just because it's softer if I bump into it, but generally it's not an issue. It has an adjustment here that moves up and down, and then all of the legs go in and out. Up here it's got a squeeze to turn thing. So you press that in and then you can turn it. It has levels so that you know if it's flat or not. So it's got one here, and two there. And then to attach the camera, you turn the screw on the side here and a plate slides off. And then it's got a little sliding screw on the inside there. So you grab your camera, flip it upside down, line up the screw with the hole on the back of the camera, or the underside of the camera, twist it to tighten that up, and then it has a little lock system so it flicks down, and then it slides back onto the tripod and screws in place. It can go all the way down. Obviously you would position the camera so it's not pointing straight up if you wanted to shoot straight down, but it's an option, so it only does that in one direction, like that. It's not great for filming because if you want to turn the camera at all, it's quite hard to keep it level while you're moving, but I use it whenever I'm shooting portraits and if I'm doing still footage. So right now I'm using a very flimsy tripod that I avoid using while I shoot this one. I have this one, but I don't trust it very much. I'm quite used to my main tripod and it feels flimsy by comparison. I like to travel with 2 batteries to increase the length of time I can use my DSLR, but I only have 1 battery for my Nikon, so I make sure it's fully charged before I leave and use it sparingly. I've noticed it shares a charger with my old Samsung phone, so it's pretty easy to charge on the go if there are charging ports around. There are different lenses that are best for different things. I usually use an 18 to 55mm lens, and if I don't have to carry it, a huge zoom lens, because it means I can take photos from a much greater distance. I find this is useful because it helps you take photos of people without making them pose or having them feel uncomfortable or self-conscious. Technical. When shooting on DSLR cameras, you can control the exposure, how bright the image is. Generally, we try to expose our images so that all of the details in the scene are visible. In photo editing software, it is possible to show if any parts of the image are completely black or white and make corrections accordingly. Focus, the clarity of the image. Depth of field, which objects in the frame are in focus. Choosing how much of the frame is in focus tells your viewers what is important in the image by directing their eye to where they need to look. Shutter speed, how long the shutter stays open. This is how you see movement in photos. And white balance, how the camera interprets the light to give you a realistic image. This is affected by the aperture, ISO and shutter speed. Composition. Composition is another important aspect of photography. This refers to how you fill the space or don't fill the space within your frame. There are different techniques that have varied effects on your photography. Rule of thirds is when you essentially break up your photo into thirds using whatever's in the frame. If there's a person in your shot and they're looking to the side, it's best to leave a gap between them and the edge of the frame. If not, have them looking toward the centre. This is called direction of sight and feels more natural than if they're right at the edge. Leading lines is a technique where you use the lines in an image to lead your viewer's eye to a certain place in the image. Negative space is when you leave an empty space within your image. Another technique is frame within frame, which is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. You put your subject inside a frame in your photo. Troubleshooting. Even with all the gear and all of the technical and compositional knowledge, photos don't always go as planned. This is totally okay because it can leave you with cool memories to look back on. For example, Sam took these 2 photos of me. In the first, you can see me miming how to focus my camera correctly. Press the button halfway down and then all the way down. And in the second photo, you can see that I am posing and completely out of focus. Another common issue is not looking for intersecting lines. By this, I mean things in the background or foreground that are getting in the way of your subject. For example, I took this photo on the Kaimanawa trip. As you can see, Liam is being skewered by the track marker pole. Editing. There are so many different ways to edit images, and a lot of it comes down to personal preference, so I'm going to explain to you how I edited this image. So first I think I'll talk about the composition of the image and which techniques I've used. So we'll put the overlay grid on that shows for rule of thirds. And at the moment, we've got these people are pretty close to a third here, so I could move that over. We've got a path coming up from the centre here. We've got this person slightly off centre. So I think I'll try putting him in the centre. There we go, that puts them nicely in the corner of that there, or I could move that up, get them right in that, on that line there. And then I'm having a look over here because you can kind of see the balance a bit better. So I think I preferred having this closer to the centre line. So I'm going to change that back to as I shot it. Another option would be to come down from there, like that. And that puts that right at the centre. And this person's quite far from the centre, and I think I prefer the balance of having them in the centre. So I'm going to go up from this corner, keep going to there. See, to me that looks pretty well balanced. Go slightly further. Cool. So in Photoshop I'd bring in a ruler from this side and make sure that that's centered, so I might do that after. But I won't show that for now. So the path's now really nicely centered. We've got this person standing on the third line. This section is all brown. This section's mostly blue. This section's mostly white. This one has texture, and I'm pretty happy with that. We've got a peak here lining up with this line as well. Turn off the crop settings, so it'll save that there. So first, temperature, so you could go a little bit cooler, like that, or a little bit warmer. Double clicking on temp to reset that, because I think that's actually pretty close to being a natural colour. So I'm just going to leave that setting. Tint would make it greener or pinker, which I definitely don't need. I usually add like that much exposure just because it means I have more to work with, because some of these settings down here darken the image more, so I like to start with it slightly brighter and then take it down. I'm going to turn on this will show me if my image gets too bright, like, hold on, I'll just adjust a couple there you go. So when the red shows up, that's what that is. Reset those two. So I like contrast, so I'm going to add +20, and that brings in some clarity down there. Actually, I think I'll go +10, because this section changed so much. I think I'll try using dehaze instead. Highlights, I'll bring them down slightly just to make the clouds less glary. Maybe less than that. Shadows, might try making those darker, or like darker is better. I'll do -10. There we go. Whites, again that changes the clouds, but I don't really like darkening whites because it makes the image look dark in an unnatural way. So I'm going to brighten that up a bit more and then darken the shadows slightly. I like bringing the blacks down just a touch. Again, it's back to my preference of contrast. Dehaze here. Dehaze is really intense, so just adding a little bit, because if you fully dehaze, it gets like that, looks super over edited. So I just a tiny bit of that, and then I skip vibrance and saturation and go straight down to the levels. And I like to put a point in the middle so that it stays the same. Check these two numbers are the same. Because I like this point to not move while I'm editing, because then you can make an S curve, so that's the S there. I wouldn't do it that dramatically. So I kind of just eyeball it and see what looks natural while still being slightly better than natural. Move the highlights slightly up. So you can check the numbers here if you want to see exactly how much you're editing. And I might bring this down a little bit. Sometimes I like bringing this up, which kind of, you can see how the greys are getting a bit, or the blacks are turning grey. But I don't think I'll do this for this image because I want it high contrast. But it's one I would do on like stylistic photos of fashion and stuff. So often I like to add a little bit of green to the shadows, but because this image, the shadows are so warm, I might, you see, you could add tiny bit. So let me try adding just one to the shadows. So I think I want the sky where the highlights are to be a bit bluer, and the
ground to be a bit more gold. I'm pressing one of the slash keys and that compares the before and after. You can see what I've done, and now to me this image looks oversaturated, so I'm gonna just take the saturation down a little bit. Cool. And then you can change all, so this one here changes the tones kind of, so like you can make the blues greener or the blues purpler. So I'd like my blues, there we go, a little bit greener. -5. Again, you don't want to mess around with this too much or it ends up looking really unnatural. I'm going to use that because then I can pick a point and then it will just change that setting like this, so I can see that it's registering that as mostly orange and yellow. So I'm going to change that, make it slightly pinker. Not that much, that's too much. -10, -10. Now, saturation, that's exactly what it sounds like. I could make the sky look intense, make the sky slightly brighter, double check it by undoing it and then redoing it. And then I might test making the oranges slightly brighter. So that's mainly affecting that tussock. So I'll undo that setting, try making the yellow a little brighter. Yeah, there we go. I like that. That's got, so here I'm using kind of colour theory. So the blues show isolation. So you can see this person's right by the patch of blue. And then we've got blue up in the sky here. And then the warmer colours, like the yellows through here, make you feel connected and happy and all that. So I've got my group here in the yellow section. Yeah. And I'm not going to mess around with that anymore. So I'll move down to luminance. So that's kind of how bright the image is, or how bright the individual colours are. So for the blue, I could make it a little bit darker, but I think I'll just leave it actually. I don't think that helped. I'll try a +10, just a little adjustment. Yep, I'm happy with that. Made the sky slightly brighter without washing out the whites. Blue, so let's try, I want the ground to be slightly darker. So we'll go negative, I just want -5. -5. Now these ones are what people use to get those Instagram photos that look like super high contrast, so let me just make one extreme. There, so you can see that it's made all this part pink and all this part kind of that aqua colour. And then these all do the same kind of thing. So that makes it very yellow and very blue, and then this end makes it very pink and very aqua. So I think I like kind of the pinkest side, so I'm going to add 5 to that one. This is overdoing it, just so you can see the difference. I like this side, so I'm going to go try -20 on that one. No, too much, -10. There we go. You can use presets over this side. They've got a bunch that they give you. And then these are my presets that I've made up for things. If I was bulk editing a ton from like the same event or the same place, then I would just make a new preset and just add it to all the photos. You also have the option to go through your whole history with this. So if I decided that I liked it more back here, I could just click on this and it will reset it to that point. And I can see all the changes I made. And this is like preview window up there. So just to give you the before and after. Before and after.
End. As my presentation draws to a close, I have a challenge for you. During the next week, try to take a photo of someone you know using one of the compositional techniques I mentioned earlier. Either rule of thirds, leading lines, negative space, or frame within frame. Send it through to me with a caption saying what the image means to you, and I'll try to guess what technique you used. I hope you learnt some new tips to keep in mind on future trips. As always, if you have any questions, just let me know.